what's up, everybody? Welcome to a long-anticipated episode 3. We were going to tackle just kind of a more of a broader topic socially that's, I think, kind of been present for some decades, millennia, if you will. But I think we're going to punt that to episode 4. We're going to punt that to episode 4. So it is inauguration week, and so there's already been quite a bit of festivities, controversial moments. So figured, hey, why don't we just jump into a few of those and, have that challenge of not lining up with one side or the other, but just asking clarifying questions, maybe getting deeper into the discussion that people aren't having. I see a lot
Hopefully.
on Facebook. I see a lot on X and all that. So, yeah, Donovan and I are here to jump in. So, how you doing, man?
Good. Yeah. Side note: I can't access X anymore because it said my account has been suspended.
Oh,
and then I haven't been able to sort through exactly why, and I don't have enough care to get to the bottom of it. So I don't remember what I posted that would have been offensive enough to Elon Musk. Although tonight we may do that. So. Yes, I don't have X anymore, but obviously I have plenty of access to information. So it looks like we're covering a few things tonight, hopefully.
Yeah.
So do you want me to just kick it off here?
Yeah. Let's start her up.
Okay, so one of the big headlines this week was that Trump and Vance and their wives attended the church, St. John's Church. It's in Washington, D.C., and it's headed by, they have, I was on their website looking around, they have different levels of leadership. It's an Episcopalian church. So they have, basically, it's not like Baptist independent churches. They have reverends at the local level, and then they have bishops. And there was a lady there giving, part of the, I guess, address there. And she spoke to Trump in a way that has outraged many on the right. And so probably be good. Remind me, Dirk, if I just pull up a video it's going to share here, right? Or do you have to do that?
I think you should be able to share if you go to the bottom here.
Yeah, okay. So this lady's name was, she's a bishop. So, share here. So let's share screen here. So she... Oh, Dirk, I have to apologize. I'm not doing well here. I think I usually send you these links. And use password. I don't want to use a password. So Bishop Buddy, Budde, is I guess how you spell her or say her name. I don't know if we have to play this clip because, it's been seen so much.
The foundations of dignity, honesty, we can do our part in our time to realize the ideals and the dream of America. Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you, and as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people. I ask you in our country to have mercy upon the people. We're scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children. There are in Democratic, Republican, and independent families.
You know what, Dirk? You can pause there.
Republican and independent families.
I think that really encapsulates the gist of it. One quick note is that the irony of her, she at this point has mentioned and goes on to talk about these people that pick our fruits and do our janitorial services. And I've known exact examples of and I had a video pulled up, but for the sake of time, I don't think it's necessary, where someone, Kelly Osbourne was on The View, and she said, if you deport every Latino, who's going to clean our bathrooms? And everybody starts tripping, man. But then she's basically leaning into that right now. But
yeah,
here's the gist of it is that, president and vice president, their wives are there. And this person, I guess, addresses them, challenges them. And, specifically this is regarding a few issues, let's say the immigration issue, and then certain, executive orders about, transgenderism and just gender in general. I've heard Matt Walsh's take. I've heard Ben Shapiro's take. I've heard Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball had a fiery debate about this. And Sagar's not even a Christian. He's an atheist. And so the main source, it seems to me, of anger, maybe I'd like to ask you what you see, seems to be that this person is, bringing the politics into church. Right. And so, what would you say, as you've seen, like, response to this has been like the main outrage?
Yeah. It's been a lot of broad stuff. I've listened to maybe the first portion of the Sagar and Crystal debate over it. Well, not over that. It was over the Elon portion, which we'll get to later. But yeah, trying to parse through it myself, I can kind of like parse through and extract. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Other things like, now you're getting more into just pure political leanings on it. So if I were to, kind of take that at face value, I have the context and understanding that, the Episcopal Church is, by and large progressive. I don't know if there's still a conservative wing within the Episcopalian Church. Theologically conservative. Theologically progressive would be how I would describe the Episcopalian Church. And in many ways just aligns pretty fully with like the Democratic Party value points. So knowing that in mind, it didn't surprise me. It more so surprised me that they had the church service there, knowing that was possibly going to be an occurrence. But so some things I think I could maybe pull out of that would be a good thing. When she says that, people are fearful, like, is that a reality? Yeah. What would be the exhortation from that? Not necessarily wield with a hammer on certain issues, or maybe talk about things in a certain way. Would that be okay? Yeah. But it's hand in hand with a lot of things that's like, well, he did campaign on these things. He said he was going to do these things. He had already started signing executive orders moving in that direction. Where it gets muddy is you have maybe like the blanket beliefs on what each side thinks about the other, or what they think the other side believes. And that can be very different from what the reality is. So, just say, for example, like they're going to take all the rights away from transgender people. It's like, well, what rights? Inherent in what way? They're going to put people in cages again. It's like, well, Obama did that. So where are we different here in terms of where Trump's at? So I still haven't like fully fleshed out everything, but those have been just kind of my initial thoughts. As on social media, I see people on different sides here kind of laying out their case. I'm like, there's still some things I think can be highlighted for benefit, but it's just a lot of blanket statements.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this is interesting. I'd like to hear. I want to ask Aubrey a little more about this, because generally Aubrey's going to lean right. Definitely happy that Trump got elected, and she has her criticisms for sure. But she works at my kid's school, and my kid's school, it's a private Christian school, but they go out of their way to be diverse and international, and so they have a lot of. It's multicultural in many ways, but also a lot of immigrants, kids of Africans, kids of Latinos. And there are literally kids whose parents are illegal aliens, and who the kids are literally, illegal aliens and or maybe dreamers, and they're scared. So that's it's like it's not a theory. Oh, somewhere this is happening. I mean, these are people my wife knows, people my kids know, who are concerned they're going to be deported, their parents are going to be deported. Okay, so it's a reality. So people are scared. And let me just come out by saying I don't have a single problem with what this lady said at all. So this whole idea of like bringing politics into the church, obviously there's if you want to pull up, I have another link. It's if you skip down to point D, politics in the pulpit, and click on that IRS link there. Because I wanted to know what I was talking about. I used to be a pastor, and we're subject to this law. And the idea basically is that we as a church, not we now, I'm not a pastor anymore, but I am a member of a church, and my church, our churches are free of income tax, right? But there's a caveat, which is that you shouldn't be politically active, and that's where people talk about you're not supposed to bring taxes into the church, and if you or you're not supposed to bring politics into the church, and if you're starting to do that, then you should be taxed. Okay, well, number one, churches have to decide, where they're going to align and what they're going to do, and they don't have to be tax exempt. They're free to, forego that if they want, but the exact actual law is written, and this is what we're looking at here. This is a letter that's sent out yearly to remind nonprofit organizations of their restrictions and responsibilities. So if you would scroll down a little bit, keep going. Oh, all right, let's stop here. Okay, this is it. All right. So this IRS, we're going to look at the second line here. The prohibition against political campaign activity has been in effect for more than a half a century and bars certain tax-exempt organizations from engaging on behalf of or in opposition to political candidates. So as I read this, you're not supposed to get up from the pulpit and say, vote for Trump or vote for Kamala or whatever. However, these organizations can engage in advocating for or against issues and to a limited extent, ballot initiatives or other legislative activities. So it's not that churches are not allowed to engage in politics. It just depends on what you mean by that. They're not supposed to be an arm of a campaign tied to a specific name. But according to the U.S. law, and really just the nature of religion has moral implications, and the law enforces morality. You can't help but address things. So you can, for example, by my understanding of this, the churches aren't supposed to get up and say, vote for Trump, but they can preach against abortion. Right?
Yep.
You can address issues. You can speak on issues of immigration and abortion, policing, and all kinds of things. So bringing politics into the pulpit is not avoidable, really. So this lady bringing politics into the pulpit, I don't have a problem with it. And essentially, what she did is call Trump and Vance to have mercy. Now, people are saying, I've seen posts everywhere like, well, all she did was call for mercy. That's a Christian virtue. Why are you upset? Like, okay, well, I'm not foolish. I know that she's doing more than that. She wouldn't be saying that to Trump if she thought what he was enacting politically was unmerciful. So she is implying that she wants different policies. Okay. Probably more lax, maybe open borders. I don't know. She didn't go into detail, but let's just say, I know she doesn't like Trump's policies, which is why she's saying this. Now, what does she want? I don't know. Something to the left of that. I don't have a problem with that. For her to have that opinion, number one, how open should the border be? How should we address the presence of immigrants in our country, illegal immigrants? To what extent should we enforce that? To what extent should we deport? Like, that's a discussion we can all have. I don't have a problem with her addressing that from the pulpit at all. So I have a different contention, which we'll get to. The question of whether or not the church should be involved in politics, like, yes, you have to, because politics is just the application of really morality.
Yep.
And philosophy, human philosophy. So I've got this verse here. I'll just read it. This is Acts 5:27, when the apostles are going around preaching the gospel, and the Jewish authorities arrest them and threaten them. And Acts 5:27, when they had brought them, they, being the authorities, brought them, the apostles, and set them before the council. And the high priest questioned them, saying, "We strictly charged you not to teach in this name. Yet here you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching, and you intend to bring this man's blood upon us." So they don't like the activities of the apostles. Verse 29, Peter and the apostles answered, "We must obey God rather than men." So even the IRS restrictions, you can certainly decide that you want to stand in the pulpit and say, "Hey, vote for Trump." But you just have to be willing to take the consequences, which would be, at this point, the loss of your tax-free status. Now, the apostles were risking more than that, which was their lives. So you got this whole idea of, you've got the church can be involved in politics to an extent with limitations, but it can even go beyond that. It can go beyond the limitations and just sacrifice something, sacrifice your 501(c)(3) status, right? And I don't think this lady is just calling for basic empathy. I think she's calling for policy. She was very careful not to delineate that. Again, I don't have a problem with that. My problem mostly, so who am I upset at? Am I upset at this lady for what she said? No, I'm not. I don't have a problem with what she said at all. My problem is that Trump and Vance would go to that church service. That's my problem. So if I come to you, Dirk, and say, "Hey, I went to a church this Sunday, and this lady was preaching, about gay marriage and about transgenderism and about how, there's more than one way to God," and what would you say to me?
Why?
Why what?
Why'd you go?
Why did I go to that church? Why did I go to that church? Right. So this is again, we're trying to look at this through a biblical perspective, and come to the door, which is Jesus Christ himself. And what does reality have to say about this? What she said is not bad. She's calling for mercy for immigrants. Great. So another quick verse here, Exodus 22:21. This is God speaking to the Israelites after he pulled them out of Egypt, and he's sending them into the promised land. He says, "You shall not wrong a sojourner." So a sojourner in this context is someone who's not from your tribe, not from your nation, but is coming through your land temporarily, long-term, whatever. "You shall not oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt." So God is appealing to the Israelis, the Jewish people's experience as sojourners, as immigrants in Egypt, and saying, basically, have mercy. So that's fantastic. Now we can get into the relationship between mercy and justice and how these things relate, and we will get to that a little bit. So in that sense, yeah, I have no problem with her telling him to be merciful. Does that mean they shouldn't deport anybody? We'll get to that. But my main issue is not the message, it's the messenger, right? So I did a little research about the church. It's an Episcopalian church, which has some variety in it, but generally, as you mentioned, has tended progressive. And by progressive, what do you mean, Dirk?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, kind of point by point alongside with the Democratic Party. So usually, in favor of same-sex marriage, transgenderism, I don't know about open borders, but what would be some other points? Egalitarian in their theology in terms of, you ordain women for preaching ministry. I don't know if they would agree on like penal substitutionary atonement or not.
I think it's going to vary, and that's where it gets tricky, is that it's not defined.
Yeah.
You may go to one Episcopalian church, and on the essence of the gospel, they may still be good, but you go to another one and they're not.
Yeah.
But that's part of what's tricky. If I go to this church's website, So you go to a church's website, Dirk. So you move to a new town and you're trying to find churches. Okay. You go to the websites. What's one of the main links you're going to click on?
Statement of faith.
Exactly. What do we believe? They don't have that over at St. John's.
Oh.
So you got to do a little, one, you have to just know your history, know the history of the denomination and what it's doing. Two, you got to dig a little bit. So, I found a couple links on their website. So they have a lot of, services they offer. And one of them is weddings. So you go on there and, if you scroll down to the doctrine portion of the outline where there's a link to stjohnsdc.org, weddings, you can open that up. And here's what they say about weddings. So it's definitely not like they're not leading with theology and doctrinal statement of faith. They're offering public services. So are you able to open that?
Yeah, let me grab that here quick. Okay.
All right. So Dirk, you just read the first sentence there. And I won't tell you what caught my eye. We'll see if you catch it too.
Okay. Marriage is the holy sacrament through which two people exchange vows before family, friends, and God. Just that?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, they say two people, not man and woman. So
exactly. So, okay. So you could say, oh, Donovan, you're just seeing things like, boom, this was a blind test. I didn't discuss this with you. It's very clear. This is very intentional. It's not a man and a woman. Okay. And you don't have to open up this link, but I did. Right. So you don't have to open this other link, but I did a little more research and there's basically their reverend, as part of an, activist group that was fighting for legalization of gay marriage and this and that. Now, look, obviously there's people out there that believe in that, but as a Christian, we believe that's unbiblical. So my point is this: you got a church that's pro-gay marriage. So you already got a problem when you have this lady who's not only just at some point has been a reverend or something. Now she's the bishop, right? And she's in charge of this church or a region, right? And now Trump and Vance go to this church. Why? Because they were asked to. It's called the Church of the Presidents is another nickname for this church because it's proximity to, obviously, the White House and all the happenings in D.C.
Yeah, it's right across the street.
Basically,
or down the street.
Exactly. Right. So basically, for many, many years now, let's see, every sitting president has attended the church at least once since it was built in 1816, starting with James Madison. Many of the traditional inauguration day spiritual services, whatever that means, has been held at, there's spirits there, all right. Yeah, there's a spiritual service going on. So, again, from the perspective of the right or the perspective of the left, well, that's not, I'm coming from the biblical perspective, which is why is Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, who seems to be, as far as I can tell, a Catholic, and he could be a strong Catholic, I don't know. Why do they go to this church? Well, it's because everyone has. Well, so you're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to buck trends. You're supposed to drain the swamp. And I just think this, to me, is an example of how, look, I'm not here to judge whether or not Trump is a Christian. He may or may not be. I don't know. If he is, he may be a pretty young one. Okay, well, who's discipling him? I'd like to know who's in charge, who's handling this, right? So to me, that's the outrage. I wouldn't call it an outrage. I'm not outraged about it, but there's been an outrage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not outraged about what this lady said. I'm outraged at the Episcopalian Church's drift from the Bible, right? That's an outrage. I'm outraged about the ordaining of women as pastors and bishops. I'm outraged about their promotion of gay marriage and whatever else they may be promoting out there that's anti-biblical. And I'm disappointed I'm not disappointed because I'm not surprised. I'm not holding Trump up as some kind of like Christian model.
Mm-hmm.
At best, he's a young Christian who is in strong need of discipleship. At worst, this is a cloak he puts on because it meets his political ends. I would never go to that church.
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey and I went to a church once when we were first married in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't know anything, man. I was young, right? So maybe that's it, right? I was a young Christian, and Aubrey really wasn't too schooled. I mean, she was raised Christian, but she wasn't too schooled on how to pick churches. So I was literally just opening the yellow pages and pointing at a church, and then we'd go. Man, it was wild, dude. Like, I know a lot more now about how to pick a church, but I didn't then. So I mean, it was wild. So we go to this church, blah blah blah. We're a few minutes in. There's some guys leading the service. Okay, a few minutes in, a couple ladies join him. Lady takes over the service and says something to the effect of, "They're baptizing. They're doing infant baptism," which, all right, whatever. But she's baptizing this baby girl, and she says, "You know, I've always believed that Jesus could have been a girl. And you know what? Just no. No, he couldn't have been a girl. Number one, there's no different way history could have gone. Okay. Number two, God has revealed himself as a man in history, right? Using the male pronouns and coming as a male. And so I know what's happening here. Okay. And I was a very young Christian. And we both looked at each other and said, let's get out of here. We got up and walked out of there in the middle of that service. And her high heels are clicking all the way down the aisle. You know what I mean? Like, it was not inconspicuous. So I was probably a Christian for less than a year at that point. Like, do not be surprised if you go to a liberal church and receive a challenge to your mostly right-leaning policies and beliefs. So that's my take on it. I don't have a problem with what she said at all. Let's be merciful. I mean, there's a related question and about mercy and justice and how those things relate. And, you know, maybe we could talk about that a little bit before we go on to other topics. But I'd be interested in hearing your response just to, you know, I guess my rant.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Right. I mean, we want to show mercy on the vulnerable, the people who are struggling, and, you know, depend whatever, you know, people group or demographic you want to point out. It's like, yeah, you want to show mercy. Yeah, it is. It's like, is it surprising? Yeah, it's like, who planned this? Was it just tradition? If they knew this is what was going to happen, like, why did they keep it on the schedule? Or there was so much stuff going on, it's like, well, we're just going to go to this anyways. Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise to have a clash of ideas if that's the setting. So
I don't necessarily think they would have known this was going to happen. You don't know who's going to say what.
Well, I mean, she was in the news prior years, like, you know, during George Floyd stuff.
Yeah.
She was in the news, you know, giving, you know, her opinion.
Fair enough. There's a possibility that something like this could happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. But I'm just not going to that kind of church.
Right.
You know, that's just like, no. Just no.
Yeah.
So this call to mercy. So this relates to a broader cultural issue. So you got this idea of mercy. So she's calling for mercy, and mercy is to say it's a value. It's absolutely a value. I mean, right? Like, God, we exist as God's children and look forward to joy eternally with Him because of mercy, but also because of justice. Right? This is where Romans 3 resolves the tension between justice and mercy. So, I mean, just think about, are you going to have justice or are you going to have mercy? They seem like opposing values, right? No, so we have illegal immigrants, so we're gonna have justice. They broke the law, so we're gonna apply justice. And she's saying, well, be merciful. And to her, that probably means, well, don't deport illegal aliens. So, like, okay, well, they're both values. And God is this multi-dimensional, multifaceted being that has many complex and not opposing but complementing attributes. And mercy is, I mean, I hate to say supreme because one doesn't sacrifice to the other. And again, this is where we come to the cross. But of course we love mercy. Of course we love justice. But we live in a world where the shalom, the integration of reality, has broken apart. And so these things aren't always in perfect balance. And so some people in some situations are going to more tend toward mercy. And that's more of a feminine trait, right? And that's where you see the feminization of the egalitarian church or the Episcopalian church. It's all about mercy, mercy, mercy. And then you see like the masculinization of, some fundamentalist right-wing churches where it's all about justice and justice. And it's like the reality of both of these things are values and aspects of God. And can they both live? Like, can I deport an illegal immigrant and be merciful? Or do I have to choose? That's the rub.
Yep.
Can you arrest anyone for a crime, therefore enforcing justice, and be merciful? Or is it one or the other? And so the feminization of culture is going to swing toward mercy and allow a lot of, frankly, injustice to occur because crime is going unpunished. And the over-masculinization of culture is going to tend toward justice and not be merciful. Do these things, can they coincide? Now, at the cross is where God did both. It's where justice and mercy kiss, right? Because his justice that demands that he punish sin slaughtered Jesus and poured out his wrath upon him. But because of his mercy, Jesus stood in as a substitute for man. And he takes the punishment instead of us, and now it's mercy. And so now mercy and justice are reconciled, and boom, like, the possibility of heaven and joy is all ushered in. Okay, but how do we live now, Dirk? How do you, me, some ICE agent, a police officer, whoever, think through this, apply this? How do you deport an illegal alien mercifully? And I know this is what's on your list to do tomorrow, so I need to know how you think through that, Dirk. How are you going to deport mercifully?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the rub. And I think regardless of where you arrive with it, you will not please everyone. Like, someone will be offended in some way. That's the rub. And not everyone involved is a Christian and has a understanding of grace and mercy and justice. Some are more formed, like you said, one way or the other, aren't Christians and just want that thing, just want mercy, just want justice. And I'd say, most people settle on that because it's really hard for them, difficult for them to intermingle the two, because it's really hard to arrive at a point with that. So I mean, where I'm at with it, it's tough. I mean, I think what would be, the easier ones to tackle would be known criminals who have come into the country, or the people on the terrorist watch list. Like, oh, okay,
shouldn't they have mercy?
Yeah, but what about
shouldn't
the
they
family?
be recipients of mercy?
Sorry, you were cutting out.
Shouldn't they also be recipients of mercy?
That's a good question. But then that also gets into the prison system and crime. There's even domestic crime. What is mercy? How is it applied, and who's affected? Like, is it mercy to deport the criminal back to his country of origin, knowing that citizens here are safe and not potential victims, or to allow that person to stay and, reap benefits of living in America.
Right. The point is, this takes, like most things we talk about here, is takes discernment and a balance of pros and cons on both sides, because we live in an unraveled world. Now, you're experiencing this as a father. You've got to raise. I mean, I'm still raising children, but they're a lot older. It's a lot more challenging, I think, in some ways when they're younger, because by the time, if the Lord is good to you, by the time they're teenagers, they're generally, it's going to sound crazy to someone, because I tell them I have four teenagers, and they're generally pretty cooperative and submissive. They're not completely rebellious. So there's not tons of instances where I'm having to come in and like discipline them. Like, they've aligned with our family culture. But when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, they want to grab this, they want to do that, they want to hit this, they want to. So is it merciless to discipline in whatever, by whatever means that means, whether it means some form of corporal punishment or, timeout or a lecture or whatever? Is it merciless to come in and provide consequences to your hypothetical son for kicking his sister? Is that merciless? No, we should have mercy. Okay, so just let him kick her. Well, kind of what you're saying, was it merciful to her? Is it merciful to her to let him keep kicking her? There's a lot of aspects here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it merciful to not teach him that there are results and consequences to his actions? Is it merciful to not make him aware of God's expectations? Is it merciful to not familiarize him with justice? No.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're in the throes of it. You got a bunch of little kids, man, and like, these things integrate. They're intermingled, mercy and justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And only by the Spirit of the Lord. And we're never going to apply it perfectly. I certainly haven't. But we got to get the foundations right. We got to get the big pegs right. It's not mercy versus justice. It's merciful justice. It's God's mercy and justice mingled at the cross. And how do we become stunned by that and then try to live that out as parents, as bosses, as politicians, as judges? It's very complicated. And unfortunately, what happens is polarization. And this lady comes out and says, "Mr. President, I urge you to have mercy." And people on the right go freaking nuts. And I'm like, what? I think she's right. Again, my objection is more the messenger and the fact that these presidents and vice presidents lack the discernment to be in a situation like that,
Mm-hmm.
versus her message. I think it's a great message. Yeah. Be merciful.
Yeah, I don't think there would have been as much outrage if it was a male Baptist pastor, There would have been some. I don't think there would have been as much.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And do you think that's because of people's biblical convictions of ecclesiology?
No, I think even, people, whether on the right, would see like, oh, a female pastor. They already have a label, an assumption to project, whether it might be right or wrong, but they already have essentially, oh, here, I know what's coming now. Where, yeah, I think if it was, in a sense, packaged in a different way, like if it was a Baptist male pastor, I think it would be a little bit different.
Yeah, and if I was, preaching, there would have, I may have seen myself saying something like that, but I probably would have not just said that, right? Like not just said, "Pastor or President, I need you to be merciful." Because when she says that, she's not just saying that. It's filled in with the history of her and her denomination and the church, and it's like, okay, we know what you're saying. But I think as a true prophet, you can come to speak to power and say, hey, we need a spirit of mercy and we need a spirit of justice. And how do we, basically everything we've been talking about, how do we walk in this? How do we actually walk in the image of God and who is both just and merciful, and think through these things, and let's pray together that the Spirit of God would enlighten us and, actually be prophetic to him in the moment. And so, but of course, that's not what we're going to get from, some Washington liberal church. So anyway, that's what we're trying to do here is again, try to cut through like this left versus right divide, and how does the Bible actually inform our thoughts on these issues? Justice and mercy are both aspects of God that are equally to be celebrated and praised, and us as weak, frail humans in an unraveled world, really, really struggle to integrate them. But at the very least, let's see them both as values and be sober-minded about the challenge of integrating them, and think that through as parents, as bosses, as politicians. It's not black and white, one or the other.
Yep.
So I think anything else on this, Dirk?
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll get to immigration later. I think the immigration thing is going to be a big part over the next 4 years. But the aspect of mercy with that, the challenge of it, like where does the analogy fall apart? Where you have
what's the analogy? Which analogy?
Of like with children.
Okay.
It translates. Okay, now you have a country of 320 million people, with a budget deficit of 33 trillion in debt. So it's like, how many people can we help, realistically, without falling apart as a nation? But I think that'll be part of discussion. I think here in the future is what's going to happen with all that. Other than that, I don't really have anything to add. But
no, I would just say to that, I think we can dig down that rabbit hole a little more later. But I think it's important to put different hats on. Like, okay, so am I talking right now as someone who's interested in what's the Bible say about humanity and how we're to approach the world, versus what do I think is going to be practical to contribute toward the prosperity and sustainability of this nation? Those are different things, and they relate in different ways. So anyways, it's definitely, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about that. Immigration is going to be front and center for many years, and it will always be, but especially with Trump's presidency and his commitment to kind of righting some of that. So as a immigrant, I have thoughts on that for sure, but maybe another time. So what else we got on the agenda today, Dirk?
Oh, the big question, I feel like, I don't know why. Is Elon Musk a Nazi?
Yes, next.
All right, let me share. We'll play this here.
Elon Musk is hitting back at critics who say he made a Nazi salute during President Trump's inauguration ceremony on Monday.
During President Trump's inauguration ceremony on Monday.
And then extending his arm forward,
placing his right hand on his heart, and then extending his arm forward while thanking Trump supporters during an event at Capital One Arena. Musk dismissed the allegations in a post on X, formerly Twitter. Quote, frankly, they need better dirty tricks. The everyone is Hitler attack is so tired, he wrote. In support of Musk's explanation, the Anti-Defamation League weighed in, describing the motion as an awkward gesture, not a Nazi salute. The ADL noted that Trump's return to the White House is a sensitive time for many, urging people to give one another a bit of grace. Musk thanked the organization on social media. Footage from Monday's inauguration celebration showed Musk thumping his chest, then extending his arm, telling the crowd, quote, thank you for making it happen. Thank you. My heart goes out to you. The gesture sparked immediate debate online. Critics accused Musk of mimicking a fascist salute, while supporters said he was simply showing enthusiasm. In the end, the ADL concluded it was not a Nazi salute, and Musk maintains it was a misunderstood good
tension
movement.
online.
He says such
and calls for
accusations reveal a
calmer,
heightened
more
sense of
honest
tension
discourse.
online
With President
and calls
Trump
for
back
calmer,
in the
more
Oval
honest
Office,
discourse.
the nation
With
remains
President
divided,
Trump back in
and even a
the
simple
Oval
gesture,
Office, the
awkward
nation
or
remains
not,
divided,
can
and even
trigger
a simple
controversy
gesture,
in these
awkward or
politically charged
not,
times.
can trigger controversy in these
For now,
politically charged
both
times.
Musk and the ADL hope Americans
For
focus
now,
on
both
healing
Musk
rather
and the
than
ADL
division.
hope
For more
Americans
stories
focus
just like
on
these,
healing
be sure to
rather than division.
For more stories just like these,
Okay.
be sure to
So, if you hadn't seen that a million times, let's just make it 1,000,001. Um,
Right.
so, moments like this have come up before in culture where, like, a politician or somebody's giving a speech will make a gesture similar to that, and it might ignite some hot takes. This one, I think, does stand a little bit more just because it's right after the inauguration from a figure who is heavily involved in the election, funding it, being active in it. And I mean, there's people all over. I think, the posts kind of describe that. There's the people that's like, oh, yes, it's definitely a Nazi salute. He knew what he was doing. The other side, like, you're overreacting. I watched a little bit of that debate with Crystal and Sagar on Breaking Points. I think I got maybe 8 minutes in. I'm like, this is a 30-minute debate. How could this keep going? But yeah. I kind of have my thoughts on it. I know we were texting a little bit of it. Where are you kind of at with it after a few days?
Well, let's just say I don't have this isn't a strong opinion, but I definitely found it sus. Now, you're talking about someone who's generally definitely more on the right than the left. I love Elon. I'm not a critic of him. I love the Cybertruck, as ugly as it is. It's grown on me. I hear people, say Elon's stupid. Like, I don't think he's stupid at all. I'm an Elon fan. All right. But man, that was weird. And so, okay, is it just that he's just awkward? Yeah, it could be. It could be. I've been around a lot of awkward people. I've never seen one of them do that. There's something. I watched that clip an unhealthy amount of times. Mostly just the actual just like salute. I kept rewinding it. Like I felt like his mood shifted. Like there was like an intensity to it that I was like, man, this is weird. I know I saw a post today, from some right wing person defending Musk and was like, look at all, and they had all these pictures of all these other politicians, with their arm out. Those are all still shots, most of them. And I've never seen, I get the idea of like, hey, my heart goes out to you. You normally be like this. I don't know, man. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I texted you guys, a few of you, and said, hey, man, this just seems weird. And I still can't shake it. It's like, it's a little intense. And like, and we'll get down, obviously through some of your, insights and comments and all that. Like, when you say he's a Nazi, like, what do you mean by that? We'll get into that.
Yeah.
So I guess let's just say that for now is that I found it unsettling. And this is coming from someone who's I wanted Trump to win, not because I think he's a model citizen and a Christian and mostly because I think he's a useful tool. Okay. For some of the things that I would like to see enacted. And I love Elon. I love what he's doing with his SpaceX. I love that he bought Twitter. And Aubrey said something brilliant the other day because people will mock him for buying Twitter, saying, well, it lost tons of money. It's like, well, he wasn't buying Twitter. He was buying something bigger. And I think you just saw over the last couple of weeks part of what he was buying.
Yep.
So, and he's richer now than he ever has been. So, yeah, what a moron. What a bad thinker and poor strategist. Like, I'm an Elon fan, man. And I want a Tesla. And I think I've listened to him at length on different podcasts. I think he's, people criticize him because like, oh, he was born into wealth. Like, whatever, dude. I've had money and I've lost it. Like, having money doesn't mean you're going to make money. Like, he has something I don't have. I'm an Elon fan. So still coming. So I'm just saying that to establish where I'm coming from. I still am like, man, that was weird. Like, is this like let me put, well, I think that's it for now, maybe, and just kind of get some of your thoughts.
Yeah. And I echo a lot of that too, where it's kind of weird. It doesn't haunt me. I don't go throughout my.
It haunts, dude. I have not slept. I skipped church.
Yeah,
Just watching that video. No, no, but I know what you mean. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's weird. Is it a great look? No.
Is it a great look?
I don't think you can PR out of that. Is he awkward? Yes, and it's not the first time where he's been on stage at a Trump event. Like when Trump went back to Butler, where the assassination attempt happened, and Elon spoke before, or came up during, he was jumping up and down kind of awkwardly. That's been known. And with that too, does he have Asperger's? Yes, which is on the autism spectrum, and that affects social engagement, social interactions. Doesn't mean he's stupid, just means that there's that aspect there. But also, does he like to troll people? 100%. Usually his posts on X are a mix 50-50 of trolling people and space exploration. You know what I mean? So,
are you saying he was trolling with that?
Maybe. Based off of what.
Whoa, dude, that's a big. So that's a risky troll.
Right. So, not saying it is a troll, but seeing the history of all those things together, it doesn't write it off, but it may provide some understanding. So to pose the question, is he a Nazi? I lean towards no, because it depends on what are you even talking about. Is it someone you don't like? Well, maybe, depends on who you are. But if you're thinking about the actual category, I don't think so. Because say if you take it, maybe if you split the Nazi ideology into two sections. So one being the racial, based off of what I've seen, is he a white supremacist? I don't think so. He's been in favor of the H-1B visas, which was a big debate at the end of December. He's in line with Trump's migration policies, which isn't, I don't think, zero migration because of H-1B visas. Is there something behind closed doors that he's saying or doing that may go against that? Maybe, but I'm not going to sit here and speculate. He's actually this, super racist guy. I don't know. I don't think so. But then even in the other category for.
Hey, before you switch categories, can I address that?
Yeah.
I think that so again, there's people exist on a spectrum, no pun intended with this guy, but you can be. So when I say someone's a Nazi, I'm not saying he's a Nazi. I'm saying that was sus, but you can be Nazi friendly and be highly inconsistent. There's Christians who are sleeping with their girlfriends. You know what I mean? Actual real Christians who believe in Christ and are sleeping with their girlfriends prior to marriage. So people can vary widely. I think if you watch American History X and you go, man, these guys are Nazis. Well, it doesn't mean I think that you got the leader at the top who's the pro, the full ideology. And then you've got people all along the spectrum. And even at the bottom, you've got, the younger brother who gets pulled into that ideology just because he's angry. His brother's in prison. There's a whole full spectrum. You don't have to be a fully implemented Nazi to have to be able to have some affinity. Even the H-1B thing, I wouldn't put it past a Nazi to say, hey, so we can bring in these people from other countries and pay them less and I can make money and they can work at my companies. It's not like a Nazi can be around, or a racist can't be around people of color. And so, yeah, I think a pure, fully ideological implemented Nazi couldn't stand the sight of the blacks and we got to kill them. And, I just think there's a spectrum. So yeah, I don't think he's a full blown like Gestapo officer, but so all that to say is, and there could be a spectrum there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's similar for, if you go on the other side of the ideological spectrum with communists, it's like, yeah, someone who's left leaning, like, may have some things where, like, they don't, in terms of class society, like, it might be more so in line with communism, but it doesn't mean they're communist. It's not going to say you're a Stalinist because you have some overlap. I might disagree with you, but I'm not saying you're a commie. But say even on the kind of the other sphere, which I would say is more like the government structure, which with Nazis, like, the government is heavily involved, guiding economical directions, what businesses do, very authoritative in that way. Now you can point out examples, well, this is what our government's doing, but just even at Elon himself, like, he's a capitalist. Like, he is the biggest capitalist that you could point to today, just because, like, he's accumulated all this wealth in several companies. He's very much against government overreach, which was partly why he bought Twitter, because he wanted to get that platform out of this mess of FBI, CIA, intelligence agencies infiltrating and affecting what the platforms can actually put out and censor. Or even another example where he's leading the Department of Government Efficiency, which is actually calling for less government involvement and less government involvement in people's lives and people's businesses. So again, kind of back to what you're saying, would there be some overlap? Maybe, but there's a lot of things that he's doing that I just do not like broadcast Nazi to me. Now, of course, I could be wrong, but the follow-up question for me is like, okay, so now what? Like, what does this mean then? If this was a genuine Nazi salute, what does this mean? Like, do you lose sleep over it? What do you, as individuals who are concerned about it, what do you guys do? I don't know. Is it just a topic to get really hot over for a week and then move on to the next thing and the next thing, which we'll get to, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah. So now, man, I'd have to do a little more research into, the relationship between Nazism and, government. I mean, do they overlap? Like, obviously communism is like government control of property and commerce. Like, is that what Nazism is? Or it seems more like a oligarchical control by a few people that are and that are in, working in unison with the government. Like, to some extent, you could say maybe that's actually what's happening. I mean, you got President Trump being inaugurated. In the front row is Elon, Zuckerberg, Bezos, like, and I think Trump or Elon is probably generally a capitalist, but I wouldn't say he's like a pure capitalist. Like, he's got a lot of government funding in his companies and things like that. Like, I don't know. I don't actually know enough of that. But more to your question of like, what do you do about it? Like, no, you shouldn't lose sleep about it. But because we rest in Christ. Okay. But I think what we're trying to do here, you and I, Dirk, as humans and as podcasters, is just see what's out there, discern through it, think through it. So, yeah, I'm not going to go on a campaign against Trump. Now I'll probably against Elon. I'm probably going to forget about this in 3 days and move on with life. But I'm certainly aware of these people that wield power in our society and thinking through what are they doing, what are their motivations, how are they impacting culture, and I'll just put that as a, like I said, I'm a big Elon fan, but that stood out to me as weird, and so I'll put a pin in that, move on with life. Yeah, it's not going to affect me a lot. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be either it's nothing, it's stupid, it's irrelevant, or I have to panic and lose sleep. It's like, well, it's just something that I saw and thought was weird and definitely worthy of consideration. And then I'll get up tomorrow and go to work. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there was this I was gonna share. I think one bit of guidance in this is like not turn this to fuel just this kind of stuff. So those who are just listening, so there's this tweet here from I think she's a journalist, but she has these screenshots. One is a recent article about quoting JD Vance, and JD Vance says, quote, "I want more babies in America," end quote. JD Vance says in his first public address as vice president. This gal then says, "The Nazis wanted more babies too. So much so they barred married women from working and created the Cross of Honor of the German mother." And there's the other screenshot is a picture of what that medal looked like. And this just is not helpful. Like, yeah, the Nazis drank water too. Like,
yeah,
she's taking it out of this context where we're not having enough babies.
I mean, does she not want more babies?
Maybe not her personally, but
no, I mean as a whole. Like, would she say? I mean, I'm agreeing with you and just kind of posing the question to someone like her, like, so do you not want more babies in America? So you're criticizing Vance for saying that. Like, are you saying you want the opposite? Like, what is your vision?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that a problem?
Right. And is it just to grift and get a hot take and get attention from just making a post like this?
Right. The parallel here is that, Elon did this and so did Hitler, and therefore he's a Nazi. And JD Vance said, "I want more babies in America," and so did Hitler, wanted more babies, therefore you're Hitler. And you're saying, well, Hitler also drank water. So anything that happens that Hitler also did, Hitler wore pants. And here's Dirk. I think you're wearing pants, I hope.
I am.
Know, but oh, freaking Nazi.
Right. It's like I can't remember exactly what it was, but like Bernie was doing a speech many years ago and had pointed out something that Castro had said. And I think it was like,
I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, it was something where like he was about reading or something like that. It's like, well, who is it? Like
pro literacy.
Yeah, but then people's like, well, he was also murdering people, but it's like, it's so dumb when you take like a common value that humanity has valued for millennia and say, well, it's a Nazi thing now. Like, it's just not helpful. The U.S. birth rate it's been in decline for a while. I mean, it's one of those things that precedes a collapse of a society. Like, not being able to replace yourself. When you have when the greatest size of demographic is the elderly, and you're not having enough babies, enough kids to help supplement and work and take care of and take care of the elderly and inject things into the economy, like the whole thing falls apart. So it's not really drawn out, I think, to its to what she really means by this.
Right. I mean, if he'd have said, "I want more white babies in America," well, now we're talking. Okay, now we got something to run with. But yeah, we should be faithful and multiply. Yeah, we should like reproduce.
God said it first.
As God. Yeah, I mean, there's both. You can take the sociological angle on it, which is if you don't reproduce, you die. That's it. Or even just biological, like that's it. So, but then there's also obviously the biblical command to be fruitful and multiply. And that's all he's saying. Like, Yeah, great. But yeah, it's what you're saying is like everything. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think posts like that are part of what has swung the political pendulum the way it has in the last year or so, and leading to Trump's election, is people doing stuff like that, saying stuff like that. And on the other hand, the population having access to information, access to podcasts and things like that, where people can actually talk about this stuff in more thorough and nuanced ways, and saying like, you can't just troll me like that anymore. Like, some people are obviously still subject to it, but I think there's a growing number of people who are like, dude, like, okay, yeah, he's what's kind of what Elon said. Yeah, I'm a Nazi. Yeah. Vance is a Nazi, like, because he said he wants babies. Like, just tired of being treated like imbeciles.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep.
It's like, things are more complicated than that.
Yep.
And it works for some people, but I think it's working for less and less people.
Yeah, I agree. That kind of goes into like this next part here, and I think we'll wrap it up here soon. But I think it's something that we'll, kind of return to. But it's on this season of outrage. Every political cycle, what new round of outrage do we have? And I've just seen a lot on Facebook and Twitter, on X, and it's one of those things. It just drives me nuts. It kind of goes off what you're saying. Like, you can't fool as many people anymore because we can pull receipts. We have access to the internet. We can look up history here. And where this week there's been such an outrage over a number of things, or even the last couple of weeks before the inauguration, but over a few things that people are so outraged about, or I'm like, wait, where were you 2 years ago when this was happening? But it was in the Biden administration. Where were you? Like, this was happening a couple of years ago, and did you miss this? Did you overlook it?
Right.
There's a few things. We can get into them at length in future episodes, but talking about the oligarchy preceding the inauguration, and this week too, it's about, well, it was in Biden's farewell address, warning about an oligarchy forming. It's like, okay, people being mad because you have billionaires like Elon, Sam Altman with OpenAI, Larry Ellison with Oracle, and Trump himself is a billionaire. But having these guys, or Bezos and Zuckerberg, at the inauguration's like, what does this mean? Are they going to be in control of everything? Well, they do control a lot already. And the thing is, those guys have been in control of a lot of things for many years. Like during the Biden administration, during the Obama administration, but at the same time, let's just say, yeah, all those guys suck. But at the same time, you weren't mad about, George Soros, Reid Hoffman, Jack Dorsey, Zuckerberg during Biden's administration. And those guys are big time donors. Those guys have a lot of sway in district attorney races, House representative races, Senate races, the presidency. Dorsey and Zuckerberg were active in the 2020 election with what was getting censored on their platforms and what was getting through. Like, that was already there. That was already happening. But as soon as Trump becomes the central figure now in politics, it's like, well, let's just attack everybody around him, even though the same pattern has been there for a long, long time. I mean, what do we think it was like? Even around World War II, we had Fords. Before that, you had the Vanderbilts, you had the Rothschilds, you had Rockefellers. Like, this has been around a long time. And to think, oh, this is some brand new swaying culture, like, you have to, you got to read a little bit more, please. So
the people that I listen to, I mean, I listen to several things, but like, let's just take Crystal and Sagar for an example. Breaking Points. He's more on the right, she's on the left. But as I listen to the podcast, I realize they actually agree a lot of the time. It's like very rarely are they actually fighting. They'll fight about immigration. Mm-hmm. They fought about Elon Nazi salute. but most of them they agree. And the reason that they mostly agree is that they both are populists. She's a left-wing populist. He's a right-wing populist. They're both anti-government corruption, oligarchy, crony capitalism. So Saagar would be a capitalist, more right-wing, but he's more of a free market capitalist, like actually let's get corruption out of government. So the point is they both really agree a lot of the time because they both have a common enemy, which is corporate corruption.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't start last week. Like Crystal Ball, which is crazy. That's her parents named her Crystal, knowing her name was Ball. They should have named her 8. Oh, so stupid. But this isn't a new thing. Like the left, the true left, not liberal, like neoliberal, really just freaking conservative, like politicians like the Clintons and Obama. But true critics from the left of Clinton and Obama, people that like more side with Bernie, are more socialist, maybe even communist in their leanings. Their critique is that the system has betrayed the American people and has handed over money and power to the corporations and the billionaires. So yes, this didn't start with Trump at the inauguration on Monday. This has been an ongoing issue. They even call it the uniparty, right? The left and the right, who cares who you vote in? At the end of the day, all these people are still just handed over to the corruption of the ruling class and the rich. So, yeah, this isn't a new thing. This has been an ongoing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of rattle off a few of these here before we wrap up, like the pardons. So much attention was, going towards like the J6 pardons. And then, I think it was yesterday, the pro-life activists who were put in prison in the Biden years just got pardoned. Right at the same time, in the last few minutes before Biden leaves, he pardons his family. And, most of the time, like a pardon, if a pardon is accepted, it's an admission of guilt of some kind. And especially if it's a blanket pardon that stretches back to 2014, kind of sus. A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, some of the other pardons that Biden gave, well, this was more of a commuted sentence, but the Kids for Cash judge in Pennsylvania, like, dude was locking up juveniles for kickbacks. Like, that guy got his sentence commuted. Like, what? Why isn't this like an uproar of injustice? Shapiro from the governor of Pennsylvania did say something on it, but it's like vastly different things. And the J6 stuff is really interesting. I think it's worthy of a lot more time to dig into because there's a lot there. But like kind of the next thing, like with Secretary of Defense, people, getting mad about Hegseth being a nominee, say like, well, there's alleged character issues, drinking habits. He's had multiple marriages, but I think it was at his confirmation hearing at the subcommittee level, one of the Republican senators pointed like, well, how many of our senators have been on the floor for vote drunk? And he was like pointing out someone else who was at the hearing. It's like applying a standard that no one else in this room is really meeting either, even if it is true. They'll get really mad about him. He was also an anchor on Fox, so like, oh, there's some more ammunition. But people will get so worked up about Pete Hegseth. They totally overlooked Lloyd Austin, who was the Secretary of Defense for Biden, who prior to being the Secretary of Defense was on the board of Raytheon. And if you're not familiar with Raytheon, they build bombs, they build planes, they kind of do contractual work with the federal government and fund and supply war. And now this guy who was on the board is now going to be in charge of writing out checks and approving budgets for these companies. Like, no one's up in arms about that. Like, oh, we're just going to bomb all these countries and kill some kids. It's like, no one bats an eye. Like, he also disappeared for a few days last year and no one knew where he was at. Like, he had some medical issue. And again, it's like, no, I don't see, you know, my Facebook friends, you know, writing about that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's like, that's kind of a big deal. You know, just conflict of interest, like blatantly, like right in front of you. The last one here was the time off. So I remember during Trump's first term, it was just talked about so much. How many times he went golfing. I swear it was like every month it was another round of like, well, guess he's going to golf again. And by all means, critique him. Based on what I found, allegedly, there were 307 days during his first term where he had golfed or done like a full round of golf, which, what is that, a few hours?
307 days over 4 years. Okay.
Yeah. So just shy of a fourth. So let's just like a fifth.
Sure.
He had done a full round of golf. Okay. Critique him on that. I also looked up how many vacation days Biden had. Is that 532?
Oh, yeah.
So but again, like, what are we, you know, getting at? What's the point? And I think the challenge just going into like this new, new presidency is like, we have to strive to be consistent no matter how much you have distaste for Trump or Republicans. Like, you have to apply that same standard to everybody, because otherwise you're just playing in the game that they want you to. They want you to hate and despise the other side. They want you to foment. They want you to cut off ties to family members. They want you to cut off ties to friends, because it builds support for their next campaign, and it brings division. And I, you know, from a gospel perspective, like, yeah, Jesus does bring division between truth and lies. But this is just something that it's just not worth it, especially if you're not going to do your due diligence and not going to learn and read and not just get worked up over a headline, worked up over a tweet. Like, it's, yeah, it's sad to see. And it aggravates me. You know, it's in a sense like an injustice, someone that just will take one headline and post about it. It's like, you don't know your history. And but again, I'm not going to take the time every time someone posts about it to say, actually, have you read into this and read into this? Like, I think that's part of why we're talking about this now. Is like, man, hopefully it helps a little bit, but yeah, something that grinds my gears.
And it's frankly boring. Like, okay, so Elon does a salute or whatever, makes a gesture, and it's just predictable. If you're a Republican or right-leaning, you think it was awkward. If you are a Democrat or left-leaning, you think he's a Nazi. It's like, does anyone disagree with anyone ever on their side? Like, is it just predictable? Just boring. It's just boring. Mm-hmm. Just like, I know what you who did you vote for? Okay, I know what you think about this issue. It's freaking boring. Right. So I think Trump has missed an incredible opportunity. Here's who I would pardon if I was Trump. Derek Chauvin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. From what I know of the case, I'm just some guy out here, man. What do I know? I don't think he murdered George Floyd. I think it was a complex compilation of events and drugs and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But boy, could you imagine that? Like, okay, so he pardoned the January 6ers. Like, okay. Man, people are upset. But like, if he pardoned Derek Chauvin, there's a potential for like, but I think he actually should be pardoned. And I also think it'd be a neat opportunity to troll. But he's missed his opportunity. Well, I guess he could still do it. He's got the next 4 years. I'm surprised that didn't happen because it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like one of the biggest events and headlines, toward the end of his. He was still president when that happened, right?
Yeah, that was
end
of May.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think
maybe too much. He doesn't want to be controversial.
Yeah, I think the question on that is like, was it a fair trial?
No, but here's the thing: like, pardoning doesn't mean you weren't guilty,
right?
So that's the whole other thing with this. Like, pardoning could mean like you were unjustly tried and convicted, or it could mean, hey, you've done enough time for this. We think that based on other things, like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Or it could just mean, hey, I like you, you're my buddy, and I'm going to let you off. Like, pardoning, in my opinion or my understanding of it, doesn't mean you weren't guilty.
Yeah.
That's why it's called pardoning.
Yep.
You were pardoned.
Kind of like Ross Ulbricht with the Silk Road.
I'm not terribly familiar with that.
So he, created a website, over 10 years ago, and people could really buy things that the government didn't want you to buy. So there's, you could buy drugs on it with Bitcoin, and other things that, are not very pleasant, to say the least. And so they threw the book at him. I think it was 2 life sentences plus some. I mean, it was pretty crazy. So yeah, he got out. He was pardoned. Was it 2 days ago? So yeah, so there's a lot. There's a good discussion, I think, with that too.
Anyway, so all that I would have expected a Derek Chauvin pardon.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting on Snowden and Assange.
Yes.
If he's releasing the JFK, RFK, MLK files, like Assange and Snowden should be pretty quick to follow, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we've kind of drifted off these last couple minutes or whatever, but feel free to cut it wherever you want.
Yeah. I think we'll call it good here. I think we're almost a little over hour 20, so that's a pretty good spot. So we'll get this out here soon. We'll get some more episodes here coming, as barring we are not sick at all. That was kind of my excuse for this last time, so sorry about that, everybody. But until next time, we'll see you later.
Yes. Goodbye.